The year I landed in Canada was an election year. Now, the timing of that could not have been any more perfect because it really shaped a lot about how I got into politics. And yes, if you're guessing that today's video is going to focus on why and how I got into politics, you are correct. Um, Now, the thing is, landing in that year, like there was debates going on. I found myself comparing that to politics in Nigeria, which was where I was coming from. And, just also thinking about my role as a public servant, all of that's really just, put together really shaped my thoughts, my views on whether or not I would one day be interested in being a politician in Canada, my newfound home. So I'll tell you all about that in this episode today. And of course, as always, I will leave you with lessons on things you can do or what you need to know as a newcomer if you're ever thinking about going into politics. I'll So when I first arrived Canada, politics was everywhere. Like it was the year I came in 2015, politics was everywhere. There were lawn signs on people's lawns. There were TV ads. There were debates going on, and it just really piqued my interest. Yeah, it was also the year that the Liberal government ousted the conservative government in Canada. So Stephen Harper was the prime minister in the year I came into Canada, and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau came in and won that election, bringing the Liberals into office. And so, really, it was just something that was just all over. And even one person in particular in my city in Regina also really just added fuel to the fire that I have, and what eventually led to my decisions of going into politics. And I'll talk about that in a moment here. And so, fun fact about me is that my mother was actually a politician back home in Nigeria. She's passed now. And no, she didn't die from political rivalries. No, she was sick and she died. But I'm not sure I'm sharing that. But my mother was a politician, so there's politics in my blood. All right, there's politics in my blood. And having also worked in public service and seen how decisions are made, I have seen firsthand how when representation is lacking, and representation may not always mean that there's a black person at the table or there's an indigenous person at the table. It goes a little beyond that to really just mean that the people who are at the table are able to take in different perspectives, different lived experiences, and from those lines, and also realizing that some of those identities of people are intersecting as well, and from that lens they're able to make decisions that actually shape the lives of everyone in a way that is truly inclusive. And I know people don't like hearing that word, and I'm sorry. I'm not sorry, but it's a thing, all right? And it's not always what we think it means. We just really need to get ourselves educated, all right? So I've really just seen how all of this are done, the gaps, the communities that are missing, and then how they're impacted. Because you also see on the other end. I mean, I'm a woman. I'm a black woman in Canada, right? And I see on the other end how these communities are impacted, right? And a lot of noise, a lot of complaining, a lot of grumbling, but those are not going to solve anything, right? So really, entering politics just became my way of bridging my lived experiences with my professional role and honoring the legacy of my mother. All right. I mean, it can be all of those things, and it really was all of those things for me. I know that when I was running for office, and yes, I did run for office. I ran for city council in my ward in Regina, and I didn't win the election, but I learned so much from that election. I'll actually share one very rookie mistake I found out I made after the elections. Now, I don't know if that changed anything in terms of number of votes that I got. I doubt that it does, or that it did. However, when I found out I was beating myself up, I kept thinking, how did nobody catch this? I mean, nobody. I talked to different people, including current politicians. They looked at my stuff. Somehow, nobody caught it until after the election. I caught it. I felt so horrible. But anyway, I felt really bad about myself. Like, anyway, it was a very rookie mistake. I'll tell you about it. I'll tell you about it. But yeah, but all of those things really, when people used to ask me, why are you into politics? The answer I usually gave, and it was true, that answer is true, is that, I've been on the administrative side in public administration. I've seen how decisions are made. I've seen how certain groups and individuals get excluded. I don't like to see that happen. And so, because I see that happen, I wanted to be able to bring in that professional experience that I have in fostering inclusive decision making processes. But I also recognize that it's important that diversity of thoughts and perspectives are on the table. And I happen to be someone who has a very broad range of experience and lived experience. I'm a woman, I'm a young person, I'm under 40, so that categorizes as young. I'm close to 40 though, right? I'm a woman, I'm a young person. I've been a student. I'm back to now being a student. I've been a student in Canada. Um, I had access student loans at the time, and even now I access student loans. So I know how that even impacts you financially and economically. I am a mother. I am a homeowner. I'm a business person. I've been a working professional, still am a working professional, right? I'm a woman of color, as they like to say in Canada, or racialized person, or a member of visible minority communities. Hate all of those words, but we can't solve everything in one day. So we'll work with what we have right now. So I've been so many things. I've been the person who needed to take the bus to go to work. I've been the person who didn't have money for, maybe a number of things. I've been not in Canada, but I've been almost sort of homeless before. Something a lot of people don't know about me, but yes, I have been. I have been a newcomer. I have been so many things, so many lived experiences that intersect. And these are all different perspectives and thoughts. I'm a Christian. I'm a Christian woman. I'm a Christian in a country that seems to have a lot of pushback for Christianity. Like it's so many things, right? And all of these different identities, they're all a part of who I am. And they all form my ways of seeing in life. And they intersect. And to say you want to deal with one, for instance, and not deal with the other, you're still at risk of harming someone like me. Like it's just what it is, right? And so just really having all of that different perspective and just lived experiences, I just felt like it gave me such a very broad range of perspective. And guess what? When I was campaigning, I was doing door to doors, I saw this play out so beautifully well, because it felt as though I could almost connect with anybody. If like almost anybody I landed on their doors, I was able to connect with at a level that was really, really great, because there was always just something that connected us. There was always a common ground. And yes, that was my best part about running for office. It was the door to doors, talking to people. It was also the worst parts, but yet the best part. The worst parts in that I had to do it in the cold a lot of times, and I wouldn't mind the walks if it was in the winter, but if it was in the summer, not winter, but in the fall. And for some reason last year the cold came early, right? But because it was in the fall, it was really tough doing that. But it was my best part because I could really connect with several people on so many levels. So really, that was one of the major driving forces to say that, look, I have all of these different perspectives and experiences, so I can for sure speak to a broad range of issues, or at least bring a different perspective, a different way of thinking to the table. That was my biggest selling point. That plus the fact that I've been in public service for so long, right? I've been in public service for over a decade now in my career. I've been in private sector as well. So there's also something to bring. So even professionally speaking, there are experiences that I was bringing to the table that I understood that was going to just offer a different way of thinking. And I also happen to have done strategic planning and strategy development, something that I believe my city desperately needs. Yes, I said that. All right. So, but anyway, that for the most part was why I entered into politics. That was the main reason. But like I said, it was also very, you know, it was also like a very surreal moment for me to just. There were many times that I'm going out there and and all I'm thinking in my head is, what would my mom think about me if she saw me right now? I felt like a part of her was living through me in that moment, in those moments, and it was good. It was great. It was great. So, but anyway, now when I came into Canada, like I said before, it was an election year, and I think that just seeing how the election process was playing out, yes, it did something. But two individuals in that particular year, one of them was actively running for office at the time. A man by the name Dr. Femi Oguride. He is or is senior, well, he was, maybe he is, still is. I'm sorry, I'll confirm that. Pastor of Lighthouse for All Nations Church here in Regina. Now, I had never met him. I didn't even know where how to begin to even start to help him. But I know that when I came in and I'm driving down the street, I'm seeing this man's poster and I was just so excited. I was like, oh my God, there's a Nigerian man who's running for office. This is really exciting. I was excited. I didn't really understand what he was running for at the time, but I started doing my research to understand what he was running for. And then I found out he was running for city council. And then I found out he didn't win. I wept for him. When I eventually met him when I was running and he was very excited to see me running, I shared with him that, look, the year I came into Canada, it was an election year. You were running for office, and that really just planted the seeds in my mind, because when I was coming in, yes, it's one of those things you think about, like, oh, it would be nice to get into politics. Like, even in Nigeria, I was thinking about going into politics eventually, but I didn't think much about whether or not I could be in the political sphere in Canada. And then I come in and I see him, and that really just planted the seed, and it was just such a great experience for me to have had. And now that in itself also speaks to the power of representation that I've been talking about, because the truth is, just seeing someone who does it does something to you. I remember somebody who ran, not in Regina, elsewhere, had reached out to me and said, hey, I've been thinking about running for office and I've just been having cold feet. And then I saw you just announced you were running. Like, man, I am so inspired. I don't care. I know it's I'll be going late into the race now, but I don't care. I'll just put my name out there just to be out there. That's what we're talking about. It's that someone sees you doing that and all of a sudden they're inspired. That's it. Sometimes you may not even win, but the real win is the person who you inspire, who comes out, who really is the one that needs to be there. Okay, so all of that, Dr. Femi was one. And then in that same year, even though he wasn't running anymore, I'd heard about another man by the name Dr. Mecca Okachi, who had run for mayor and then came in third place. That was huge. I was really impressed, because here's why it even matters. If you live in Saskatchewan, if you live in Canada, 10 years ago, it was, and I'm speaking from a racial perspective now, like discrimination, racism, entry barriers that were existing, and many of them still are existing, unfortunately. But it was, whatever you think you're experiencing right now is nothing compared to the way it was 10 years ago. It was nothing compared to the way it was 14 years ago, when people like Dr. Mecca would have run for office, right? And so really thinking about all of these different people that had run, and the successes they had made, not just even in entering the political space, but also in their personal and professional careers, it was the inspiration that I needed. So no, I wasn't the first Nigerian to run for office in Regina. Um, as a matter of fact, the year I ran, there were a number of us who ran for office at the same time. We're not opponents, we're running in different words, but it was really good to just see that we were standing on people's shoulders, and who knows who else will stand on our shoulders and take advantage. So that's people in a very not so nutshell is why I ran for office. Now, but that said, one more piece I'll add to it is legacy. I cannot help but think about legacy. I'm very passionate about breaking barriers. Anybody who knows me knows that about me. I'm very passionate about breaking barriers. And one of the reasons I think about it, I think intergenerational or multi-generational or other generations. I think about the generations coming behind me. a lot. I think about my children. I think about the world I want to leave them in. I think about how I want to set them up, but not just my biological children when I say children, but every other person who's younger than me, who's in a different generation. And people who, when we are gone, are going to have to carry on in this world. I always think about how we're setting them up for success. Because truth is, we're not going to blame them for the things we didn't teach them. We're not going to blame them for the things we didn't set them up for, right? And so really that too. And I think about the fact that if we don't break into these spaces and begin to rewrite the narratives, begin to rewrite the story, begin to forge new path that really embraces all of the different groups that are now in Canada that we all now call home, then what happens when we're not here? What happens to our children? I don't want them to grow up and sing the same songs of discrimination and racism and sexism and whatever else ism exists out there. That perhaps is one of the biggest driving forces for me. So anyway, now if you're a newcomer and you're thinking you want to go into politics, you can, but I'll share with you how. Now, first of all, you cannot vote if you're not a citizen, and you cannot run for office if you are not a citizen. As for voting, if you're not a citizen, I know there are cities who are starting to have conversations around if you're a permanent resident, at least at the city council level, you should be able to vote because the decisions of the city directly impacts you. Now, whether or not that will fly, I don't know. But there are conversations that are starting to happen in spaces around that. However, there are other ways that you can start the journey. All right, you don't wait until you want to run for office before you make certain moves. Okay, there are ways that you can start the journey. There are things that you can start to do. Now, in hindsight, many things that I do or have done and will continue to do, I honestly wasn't doing those things because I was hoping to run for office someday. No, I wasn't. I just did those things because there were issues, someone needed to get it done. I thought I could, in the best way I could, and the capacity that I had, I took responsibility. But when I was going to run for office, I found that those things were really helpful. And in hindsight, I could have done a little bit more or be a lot more intentional about those things. So I'm going to share with you just very quickly 5 things that you can do. So number 1, start local. Start early, start local is the first thing I'm going to say. Get involved in community associations, right? Get involved in community associations. Volunteer. If there's an election coming up, you can volunteer on someone's campaign, right? So you can volunteer to do that. Some of the scripts that I was able to use and just how I crafted my messaging. Yes, I had people who read through it and gave me insights, but I also learned that from a previous campaign that I had volunteered on for someone who I had worked with, and then she was running for office, and I volunteered to be on her campaign, and it was really helpful, right? So even just engaging those conversations, it was something. All right, so volunteer, attend council meetings, right? Because the truth is that change really always just begins at the local level. And when I say join associations and volunteer, I'm not just talking about political organizations. No. At your kids' schools, volunteer. That's also how you get to know people, right? At your churches, volunteer. At community events and organizations, most communities have an association. Be a member. Volunteer. If your kids are in any extracurricular activities, volunteer. That's how you get to know people. At your place of work, when they're doing like social committees and all of that, volunteer. Okay, all right, so be the change you want to see, right? Be the change you want to see. I did not make that up. That was something I believe it was, I can't remember who said it, but whoever said it, it was someone popular. I think maybe Nelson Mandela. I'm not sure. The second thing is build relationships. You know, I will always talk about connections and relationships and network, right? Build relationships. Now, in these places where you're volunteering, you get opportunity to meet people. So build those relationships. Politics is people driven, okay? Connect with councillors, connect with your members of parliament, connect with your members of legislative assembly. If you don't know what the differences are, start from there. So maybe it'll be more than 5 that I'll tell you, but get educated on what those things mean. All right, connect with different organizations, maybe subscribe to their newsletters, see who is saying what, you know, and that even starts to get you thinking about the kinds of organizations you also want to affiliate yourself with. All right, so build those relationships. Networking opens doors. All right, get to know your neighbors. Very vital. get to know your neighbors. All right. And then number three, understand the system you are in. One of the things I find, and as a career coach, I am a career coach, and I'm also doing a 10-year chronicle of my career journey on my business page, where I talk about mostly career stuff. And one of the things that I always see, even just with workplace organizations, workplace issues that people have as newcomers, is that they don't take time to understand the system that they are now in. That thing is a make or break for a lot of people. They just don't get it. All right. So understand. I remember talking to someone recently. There were some issues, and the person was just very being like, oh yeah, no, we need to fight this. And I was just smiling. The person said, I thought you were an Aluta person. Now Aluta is kind of like somebody like an advocate. An advocate is an Aluta. It's an advocate, right? It's just that sometimes when people say Aluta, they tend to just always assume the person is aggressive. Sometimes they are too, but not always the case. And so, and this person just felt like, what they thought they had heard of me didn't match my reaction. And I said, yeah, when I was in Nigeria, that made sense. If I was dealing with purely Nigerians, that would make sense. But the Canadian culture is very anti-adversarial. So you're going to learn how to communicate the exact same thing with a smile on your face, and like it doesn't even bother you one bit. Can you do that? The person could not understand why. That comes from understanding the system. You will communicate what you want to communicate very assertively, very friendly, or at least it seems that way, but in a way that no one can say that you were aggressive, yet you get the point across with a smile on your face, right? So that's something, right? Understand the system. Learn how the politics work. Learn the different levels of government, what works, what doesn't work. Learn, even when I talk about people voting, I had so many people who wanted to vote. They're like, oh, Anita, I want to vote. Where can I go and vote? I'm like, you just came last year. You can't vote. And they're surprised. So learn, okay? Get yourself educated. Honestly, education is key. Attend campaign, I want to say rallies, but really Canada's political system is very chill. I will tell you that right now. It's very chill. There are no rallies in the sense that many of us might understand rallies, okay? Either in the US or in Nigeria or elsewhere. However, there might be town hall meetings. Attend those, okay? Attend those, ask questions, understand how even policies are shaped, how you can be a part of policy shaping. Now, as of today, or as of the season when this is happening, this is what's 2025. Yeah, at the city, they're talking about trying to get people involved in the budget process. Right, that's an opportunity. Many people probably don't know this, but you can actually do your research. Of course, don't show up there and say crap, but do your research, and you can actually show up to city council. You can, put. There's a process to follow to get on the agenda, and then you can be called upon to say your piece about the budget process and system that is going on. A lot of newcomers don't know that. All right, so really understand the system. Bring your own story. Don't be afraid. One of the things that I learned early on, and I learned this more in the workplace, and I carried that with me even into politics, is to audaciously, unapologetically being you. God, I learned that, and I will never unlearn that. I am learning to embrace the totality of who I am as a woman of whatever, whatever you want to put in there. I am learning to embrace that, because at the end of the day, that uniqueness really is one of my biggest strengths. Your uniqueness is one of your biggest strengths. So really understand what's your own story, right? I talk about how my professional experience, in addition to my ability to see that there is a problem or that there's a gap with representation at tables that matter, plus my personal passion and just wanting to in some way also carry on my mother's legacy, combined is my reason why for being in politics, right? And plus my personal convictions and values as well. So the truth is, not a lot of people would want to be able to embrace themselves in that way. You are not going to lose yourself in the process. If you begin to lose yourself in the process, you might have to stop and rethink if you really want to do this, because guess what? It shows. And it's easier in those moments to start to compromise because you've already lost the sense of who you are. What's left? People can easily manipulate you. So, really, understand what your own story is and audaciously embrace that story. And don't be afraid to bring it. Don't be afraid to bring it into politics with you, right? And then finally, be patient. All right, be patient. Politics is not a marathon. When I did win the election, I had not even processed, and this is not to make anybody feel bad, by the way, but people would reach out and they're asking like, okay, so we're going next time, right? We're going next time, and I'm like, we'll see. It's a lot of energy, it's a lot of money, it's a lot of emotions, it's a lot of time that goes into it, right? It's a marathon, it's not a sprint, okay? um Not to say, and I appreciate, because I understand the mindset, which is don't let this, stop you, keep going. I appreciate that, I understand, I appreciate that, but this is the point I'm trying to make, is that change takes time. Sometimes even just getting yourself into the process, going through the process, takes time. You may spend more time upfront, developing relationships, getting educated, meeting the right people, being in associations. Oh, and I think, okay, when I talk about starting local, right? Part of it is that join a lot of associations if you can. It helps to be on boards and board memberships and all that. It really helps. So whether it's at the city itself also has a lot of board opportunities that you can leverage, or even just community associations or even religious associations, whatever, where people tend to not take religious associations as seriously in Canada. I want to say I don't know why, but that would be a lie. But that said, just having some of those experiences really come in handy, right? But you might spend some upfront time doing all of that before you ever even run for office publicly. Take the time you need, all right? Take the time you need, because all of a sudden now your life is out in the public. I had people emailing me over things that I would naturally would want to say not my business, but then because you're now considered public figure, it is your business, all right? And you're gonna have to learn to deal with that. So take the time you need, because once you're out, you're out. All right. So yeah, that's what I want to leave you with, especially if you're someone who's thinking about going into politics. I will tell you this though. If you're looking for money, it's not in politics. Okay, so get that one straight, get that one right. I will strongly tell you now, money is not going to be it, okay? As a matter of fact, it's part of why I didn't even get into politics sooner, because I wanted to at least build myself career wise, financially, to a certain point, such that if I went into politics, whether or not I win, whether or not I stay in, and I'm not earning as much anymore, it won't bother me, all right? Because I would have built myself up to a certain level where my family will be comfortable enough to just to get by, at least, So if you're looking for money, this is not it. However, um, just overall, I find public service very fulfilling. So I have no doubt that if I ever held a public office, politically speaking, I would, I believe that I would also just be as fulfilled. But it's really the process itself really was very rewarding. So yeah, that's it on why I joined politics. And from my mother's example and watching her just really go through it in a country like Nigeria, where men are predominantly the ones in politics, and at grassroots levels where it's even harder. And as a woman, as a single mother, from watching her go through it to being in public service and just seeing how decisions are made, and how that those decisions sometimes interact with the political offices, and how what makes sense may or may not be acceptable because it doesn't make sense for the next election cycle, and how sometimes that is painful to watch. And you know just watching how certain groups can get excluded from even the basics of life, just all of that combined, it really just made me realize one thing, and one thing only: politics is personal. All right. And if it is personal, what that means is that it shapes our opportunities, it shapes our communities, it shapes our future, it shapes you, it shapes your experiences within a community, within a country. All right. And one thing I've come to realize is that I can stand on the sidelines and complain about how I don't like things, or I can roll up my sleeve and get in the ring and fight. All right. And not fight from a um aggressive perspective per se, but fight to make sure that there is adequate representation, that our voices matter. And when I say our really would represent for me right now every identity I've ever had to take on, continue to take on, whether as a woman, as a person of faith, whether as a business owner, as a homeowner, as a mother, as a newcomer, as a student, whatever hour would cover, that is what I believe, that I would want to be in the ring to fight for our voice. Okay, so if this is something that you're interested in, honestly, happy to chat about this all day, every day. Maybe not every day, but I'm always happy to chat, always happy to make connections, or at least introduce to someone who may or may not be able, who may be able to help. And even if they're not able to help, they might know somebody who might be able to help you, right? But always happy to just help in whatever way that I can. Anyway, if you're new to this channel and you haven't subscribed yet, if you're new to this channel, you're welcome. Please don't walk away without subscribing. If you've been watching and you haven't subscribed, I don't know what you're waiting for. This is episode 9. So episode 10 on my 10-year journey in Canada. I don't know what I'm going to talk about yet. That's the truth. I really don't know. I kept thinking about what will be the last thing I want to touch on. What will be the last thing I want to say? I wanted to talk about why I went into PhD. I wanted to actually even merge that with this topic today. But I figured that I'm not ready to talk about why I'm going into PhD yet. I think I'll leave that until after I'm done PhD. But it's also tied a little bit to today's topic in some ways. I guess we'll wait and see what I talk about for episode 10, which will be the final episode on this series. I've never done a series before, so this is really new for me. I hope that you guys have enjoyed it. If there's an aspect of my life and experience in Canada in this 10 years that you were hoping to hear about that you haven't heard, please let me know in the comments below, and I'm more than happy to speak to that. All right, I'll be more than happy to speak to that as well. But for now, that's episode 9 and why I joined politics. I will see you in the next video. Bye.